Hello, hello, beautiful soul. How are you doing today? These are exciting times because I am coming to you on Facebook and on YouTube simultaneously on the RLove Facebook page. If you don't know who I am Dr. Andrea Pennington. I am an integrative physician and the founder of the Real Self-Love movement. And we are going to be talking today about something very near and dear to my heart, and that is conscious love. I am on a mission to help more people raise their level of consciousness for themselves, for their relationship partners, for their children, and for everyone on the planet. I truly believe that there is a match for each of us. No matter how weird and strange we may be, there is someone on the earth that is probably a really good match for you. And I believe that someone is a good soul match for you. So all of the work that I do is all about helping you get back in touch with your authentic self, the core essence of you, the soul of you, so that when you show up at work or you're in a relationship, the real you shows up. Representative. So I'm super excited today because we are going to be having a discussion that is primarily about digital dating. That's right. With this pandemic and lockdown, many people who would love to be out socializing have had to turn to the internet. So many of my friends who may never have dreamt of being on a dating app found that during the last couple of months, that is exactly where we turned. And yeah, myself included. So I'm really super excited to share with you this conversation today because one of my very dear friends and colleagues, her name is Lucy Vittrup. She's from Denmark. She's a little Colombiana mix as well. And she is brilliant. And what I love about Lucy is she keeps it real. If you've ever known any sex experts or relationship experts out there and you feel like they're kind of dodgy or they're just spitting the same stuff that everyone else is, well, that is not what you're going to get today. So I'm very excited to introduce you to Lucy Vittrup. She has actually been studying the anatomy of sexuality and intimacy for over 20 years. And she's taken her talents to high performance coaching, including on big major TV shows like X Factor. Lucy is also a best-selling author. She's been a media commentator. And today, Lucy teaches intimacy intelligence. She teaches in workshops and retreats and groups around the world. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Lucy Vittrup. Thank you so much for joining me today for this special edition of Conscious Love.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, these are exciting times, and you and I have talked a lot about this. The whole culture in terms of online dating has really changed from, I don't know, what has it been, 20-something years since the first online sites cropped up. What do you think is the biggest challenge that people are facing right now, the singles out there who are trying to make a love connection? What's the biggest challenge that they're facing?
Well, it's really, really interesting what has happened with technology in these times of social isolation, because just before the corona crisis, we were in a situation where a lot of people were actually looking to dating apps to find that special one. But a lot of people were also experiencing that it was actually a very unfulfilling experience because it felt empty, the tone of voice in the apps is really raw sometimes, et cetera, et cetera. And we can go a little bit deeper into that later. But what has happened with this social isolation is that suddenly what was once a little bit our conscious relationship and intimacy enemy suddenly has become our best friend, which is actually mastering how to create intimacy on digital media, using the digital medium, not only the dating apps, but of course also like, we're doing now, Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, et cetera, et cetera. So what's happening is, of course, that people who are single, who have been used to going out and meeting people, and even though they haven't been on a, sort of conscious dating mission, single people do have a tendency, especially, of course, in big cities, to go out. They go out just to, to suck in that energy of flirting and of like meeting other people, and that whole energy has just been cut off, just like this. And of course, what I'm experiencing, what a lot of people are talking to me about, is that they feel actually a very severe sense of loneliness, because they're suddenly they're not able to get that feed of energy that comes with being single and going out and going to cafes and bars and hanging out with people and being in that exchange of flirtatious energy, you could say.
Yeah. Well, because it is a human need. So even if a person wasn't consciously trying to go out and get married, that idea of being able to go out and still connect and flirt, as you say, is a primal human drive of ours. But I know one of the things we've talked about before is when the whole dating app phenomenon happened, we saw that people were experiencing a lot of disconnection. And that disconnection was because suddenly you weren't reliant on just, your geography. You could be connecting with people all around the country or all around the world. And it made it so much easier to just swipe left, to ghost people, to just sort of drop things in mid-conversation. And one of the things that I know you talk a lot about is we lose the emotion, the phrasing, and the meaning when you just get a text. Like you've often said that to me, that if someone just gives you like a one line answer, you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, totally. So what has happened before is that the app industry was made to make it easy for us to meet a lot of people, right? So what happened then suddenly? Oh yes, then we had millions of people that we could, potentially we just meet millions of people all over the world. But the gap between the millions of people out there and that special one whom we attach to has also become extremely obvious to us. And of course, that in itself can create a sense of emptiness. So, okay, so there are millions of people out there, but I can spend months on this app and not finding anyone that I really connect with. So that's one of the challenges, you could say, with digital dating that we have been facing, right? And the other thing is, as you mentioned, is of course the whole tone of voice, the code of conduct that digital communication has brought with it, because the degree of commitment is so extremely low. And if we that's something that I have been studying a lot, is actually mapping out how are people actually changing their ways of communicating on a digital app compared to if they were dating in the in real life, right? If you translate some of it, you would say you would never do that in real life.
Like, well, give us an example. Like, what's one example of things that you wouldn't say in real life, but you'll do it on an app?
Right. Well, actually, I have a great example of a friend of mine who told me in a very sort of sincere moment. She was telling me that she had just met this person, and within a couple of weeks, they had their first sort of a sexting. So they were having this kind of erotical exchange on text, and he starts seducing her on text. And she, answers back, and then suddenly he's silent. And then, she's like, okay, what happened? We were just sort of in this mojo thing, and then suddenly he's silent. So what would that translate to in real life? That,
Mm.
that would translate to, okay, we're in, the bedroom. He starts seducing her. She devotes herself to the situation. He goes out of the room, says he's off for coffee, and he just doesn't come back, right?
Mm.
We never do that in real life. But we feel the same. The feeling of rejection is severe, and it is actually savage, the way that we reject each other, because when we don't answer a text, if we've been texting a lot and then suddenly you don't answer, or if you connect on dating apps, and this is dating app world, right?
Yeah.
So, so if we connect on dating apps and then we have a lot of communication and then suddenly we disappear, that's a very savage way of being in a relationship with another person. Then suddenly, I mean, we were really connected, and now screw you, I don't care.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Total reality for you, which is really tough.
So the question then is, now we're in a different relationship. You and I hang out with some very highly conscious people who I pray would not do something like that. But if someone is in a position where they've been texting someone and they lose interest, are you suggesting that they just be honest and say, "Hey, it's been nice texting you, but I've decided to move on"? What would you suggest? What is some good, digital dating etiquette?
Well, this is, I teach a lot something I call digital intimacy, because the intimacy space that we have on digital media has its whole own world and its whole own communication style, right? So there are different tracks here. One of them is, of course, to be very conscious of how are we showing up digitally? Are we showing up kind? Are we showing up? How do we end? Especially, that's a big thing. How do we end a chat sequence? We've been chatting, la di da da, chatting. How do we actually end? So a lot of people just sort of disappear. Where a good thing, what do you say, a kind way of being is, of course, to be conscious of, okay, so I'm now off. I'm going, I'm off now. Let's communicate tomorrow or whatever it is. But be conscious of doing the closure in a nice and clear way. It's a lot about that. It's about being clear that you're now ending the conversation. So that is one very, very important. And that's not only dating. That's, every time we're in Messenger, on WhatsApp with friends and colleagues, to be very clear of the exit. That's one really, really important part. And of course, there's the whole other thing is how to use digital media to connect, to become more intimate, because that's, of course, a whole different issue.
Right. Well, let's get into that in just a second, because I do think that that takes it into another direction. So when you've gotten a little bit further down the line, but we have a question from Jennifer who says, "What happens when someone gets super triggered?" Uh-oh, sorry, I'm trying to bring her question into the broadcast here. Let's see if I can do that. Not exactly. That's not working. So I'll just have to read it to you. Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. All right. So what happens when someone gets super triggered by your honesty? Like, it's a hard balance. If you ghost, it's not very mindful. But if you're honest, some men will result to an attack because it hurts their ego.
That's a great question. It really is a great question. And I have to be honest, I know it both from clients and from personal experience. So I can really relate to the question. Thank you very much for that. So I would say being honest is a skill. It's a skill that we all have to, as conscious beings, we have to learn to master that skill, both in real life and in digital life, of course. So to me, and I totally count myself in on this, it's always a very important part of communication, of being honest, of learning how do I express honesty with kindness when it is a rejection, for instance. And what I know about honesty and saying to someone, well, I don't feel that we're a good match for each other. What I know about it is that one, my intention counts. My intention is everything because that will reflect the wording.
Yeah.
And it will, I am also a firm believer of energy and spiritual connection. So I do also believe that if I have a kind intention, I will, the odds of it being received with more openness, goes up. That's one thing. And what I also know about being honest in real life is that my job is to deliver with kindness, with love, compassionate honesty, and what the other person's stories trigger in them, that is not mine. So it is just that would be my answer to that great question. By the way, we must take responsibility for our own intentions, and if someone else and know that you are acting with kindness, it is much clear is kind, as Brené Brown says. Clear is kind. If we just disappear, we're still triggering. We're just being assholes, triggering. So, you can be kind or you can be not so kind.
Yeah. Well, I know we were about to go down another road, but I saw that there was another question that I'm really curious to get your take on because this is another one from Jennifer. That when we go on to these apps, and as you said, now we suddenly have access to hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of people. If you're willing to date around the world. And what do we most likely do? We're going to screen based on the profile pic. I mean, we are visual creatures, the majority of us humans. So Jennifer was starting off with, it feels superficial. I find guilty. First judgments being on the pictures that are curated on each account. It's hard to not be superficial. So what do you say about that? Because I have my own. I'm curious to hear from you.
To start off with, the sound just went off, so I didn't get the entire question. But so the question is how to deal with the superficiality of judging people on their looks, basically.
Exactly. So yes, folks,
Right.
I'm sorry if we've got some microphone dropping out. Yes, that's it exactly. If we're, we are visual creatures. We're sitting there with the app, and it's pretty easy to just say no, no, no. So how do you deal with that feeling of like, am I being superficial?
Well, I think that when we're dealing with digital media, that's something again that we have got to accept the conditions of digital media. So when we go on digital media, just like when we go into a bar, there's a certain circumstance, there's a set of rules, there's a certain set of conditions when we go into a bar. If we want to find our one and only in a bar, we know there are certain conditions, like people are likely to be really drunk, like people are likely to be in a very sort of performing mode, like there will be certain conditions. So with digital dating, it's the same. When we go down that road, we say, well, this is the certain conditions that are here. The way that we are actually prompted to look at, to choose people is from the visuals. Did Jennifer mention that she felt guilty? Was there something like that, or she felt sort of
Yeah.
Okay, and I can totally relate to that, and I love that, and thank you very much for that honesty, because it's a really important question. I just want to tell a little anecdote that I was writing for the biggest media here in Denmark, and we wanted to make an article about the logistics of Tinder. What would happen if I just swiped yes to everyone on the, without looking at the picture? I was just swiping yes, swiping yes, swiping yes. What would actually happen? How would the connection be? And of course, after 5 days or 3 days, actually, it got totally overwhelming because I had so many matches, and it's an algorithm. So it ended up with a whole bunch of matches. And I had to choose 5 to go on a date with. for this
Oh.
article. And what I decided to do was actually, so I just swiped yes to everyone. And my criteria for who I wanted to connect with was based on what they wrote.
Hmm.
So, that's a way of also you can decide and say, okay, well, I'm going to swipe yes to a lot of people. And the ones that I actually have a good writing connection with, those are the ones I go with. You know,
Hmm.
it's digital media. So I think that's the most important thing is to say, well, there's a certain set of conditions depending on how we choose to date, whether we do it in a community, look for dates in a community, whether we do it in a bar, whether we do it in university, there will be different sets of conditions, and digital media has its own.
Yeah. Well, let's take it a little bit further then, because let's assume that we have made a connection. Now, of course, we are sharing today on the RLove platform, and with the RLove app, their algorithm is all about making a soul connection based on interests and not just like the geography or proximity, but about the things that light you up. So let's say you have made a connection with someone. You've been texting a little bit and you feel like, yeah, that they're saying all the kind of things that kind of make me feel like I'm willing to go there. And just as you pointed out, there is sort of digital dating etiquette. Let's say that you have decided to maybe move off of that platform and now you're chatting in WhatsApp. What other sort of etiquette rules or guidelines should we be thinking about so that as we're consciously engaging with someone, we're being mindful of them, respecting ourselves and our boundaries as well?
So to start off with, again, the dating app world is so subtle, right? So it means something to invite someone to go on WhatsApp. Already
Yeah.
there, I would invite everyone to be conscious about that and say, okay, so the moment I say to you, hey, why don't you want to go over here? Or if you're invited by someone to go, that it has a meaning. It means something. Uh, if your intention is to that you want it to go further, well, that's your intention, right? That's what you can invite to, and you can maybe even say that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, what COVID has taught me, which has been very beautiful in the sense that I was actually a little bit at war with technology just before COVID. Is that technology, when we use it mindfully, when we use it consciously, when we use it intentionally to create intimacy, it can become a tool to actually enhance intimacy on a level that might even be close to how it would be in real life. And during the COVID crisis, I have had a group where I have tested different tools or different exercises, you could say. And I even tested one myself, of course. Walk the talk.
Ooh, you're
Have a walk
putting
the talk.
putting yourself in the real love lab. I
Oh
love it.
yes, that's the best way to do it. Um, and so really being conscious about how can we use exactly the visuals, for instance, how can we use eye gazing on
Mm.
Zoom? And that was one of the things that I did. I both tried it on myself and on my group with eye gazing, and we did it both 2 minutes, 4 minutes, and 10 minutes. And the results were very different from 2, 4 to 10 minutes, and amazing. I mean, amazing. I had a group with 20. Yes, yes,
So
yes.
why don't you first explain to people, just in case they've never heard of it? I
Of course.
assume people have, but what is eye gazing?
Right. So, eye gazing is an exercise that is all about connecting with eye contact. And the intention here is everything, of course. So, the intention is not like to down, eyeball you. That's not the intention. The intention is to open your heart and you open the window to your soul. And so, when you look at each other, you actually intentionally open yourself. You allow the other person to look into your heart, look into your soul. And so if both people do that, you both allow the other one to look into your heart and your soul, and you also look with your heart and your soul into the other person. Again, is everything here. And then what you do, I highly suggest you do it with a timer, that you time it. So it's 2 minutes, 4 minutes, depending on how courageous you are, because it does take a lot of courage, especially if you don't know each other very well, at least. So you can start off with 2 minutes, and then 4 minutes, and then 10 minutes is like, the ninja version. And I did that myself with someone I didn't, I hadn't met him in real life at that time. I had communicated with him over Facebook, actually. And
But
then
was this like a first date? You're doing eye gazing?
yeah,
First cyber date?
yes. And it was really exciting. And, he knew about my work. So we had a pre-framing there. And, and I said, hey, do you want to try out this exercise? And he was like, yeah, cool.
And so
Yeah,
you're literally, are you just looking into the camera? Are you looking at their
yes.
face on Skype or whatever
you look at the screen, not at the camera. You look at the screen. And I did test this. So that's the way to do it. You look at the screen. You have their image on your full screen, and then you look at the screen. And again, the intention is everything. And the feedback on this has been absolutely mind-blowing with the
like
group.
what? Like people feel like they're really connected, but does it also turn some people off where they just know, okay, you're not for me?
Well, I have 20 people who I tested it on, and the feedback from them, in this group work I did just like 2 weeks ago, it was that they felt connected, they felt a feeling of oneness. Wow. They felt their selves dissolve and merge in one with the other. And all this is with people that don't know each other, by the way, and they don't date afterwards. It was just, testing testing it as a tool to use digital media to connect on a profound level.
Well, it would be interesting to see if any of them went on to have like a love connection, or if they might once the confinement is over.
I would love to know that. Yeah. Yeah, I'll let you know when I've interviewed them.
So I want to talk a little bit more, just picking your brain. Your whole work is around intimacy intelligence, and you make a really strong distinction between sexual intimacy and everything else. Like intimacy, for some people, it will conjure up this thing to mind that it's all about sex, but you say it's much more than that. So can you just give us a little bit of a primer on what you mean by intimacy intelligence, and then the next step is, how do we develop more of it?
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question. I can talk about that for hours. So
yeah, that's a whole other podcast.
So a lot of people ask that question. They say, so isn't intimacy about sex? And they even ask, isn't intimacy sex? And just the short version is, sex is a physiological act. Intimacy is an emotional state. So we can have intimate sex, but we can also have sex without being intimate. So that's why intimacy and sex, they're not the same. Sex is just a physiological act. Intimacy is an emotional state. And the emotional state is, intimacy is something we can have yes, we can have it with a romantic partner. Yes, we can have it in an erotic experience. We can also have it in a non-erotic experience with our partner. Intimacy, we can have an intimate conversation. We can have spiritual intimacy. Now I'm really giving away all my golden nuggets.
Yeah.
So we can have spiritual intimacy, where we actually have an intimate relationship with our higher power. We can have intimate spiritual intimacy with our partner, but we can also have it with friends and family and like that. So I talk about having intimacy when we really want to create it on a conscious level. It's important to understand it sort of in its separate parts. So there's emotional intimacy, there's physical intimacy, and there's physical, non-sexual, and sexual intimacy. And there's spiritual intimacy, and of course there's digital intimacy, as we have touched a little bit earlier today, right? So if we really want to create intimacy, a lot of people, they have this idea that intimacy is something like that has to happen. Oh, my husband, I long for intimacy from my husband. And then I ask, oh, I really, so how are you being active in creating intimacy with your husband? And they're like, well, it happened. And what I offer is a mindset saying, well, maybe you can create intimacy yourself if you take it on as a skill set that you practice. So how do you do it is your next question.
Yes, because I know that you've actually outlined specific skills, and so that if we wanted to like rate ourselves on what is your, intimacy intelligence quotient, you could look at these specific ones. But also, you also have techniques that we can start to put into practice. Like it's not like you have to go from 0 to 100 score on the intimacy scale, but you can start to practice, right?
Definitely. And of course, we're now talking about a course that is like an 8-week course. So the really, really short version of it
Yeah.
is and the reason why I say it is just to everyone listening, that this is of course much more complex than just do these 3 things and boom boom, then you have your intimacy. So I say it with the humility towards the complexity of it, but one of the ways to practice intimacy is I teach 5 keys that you can use to practice it. And I'll just say them really quickly. And a lot of people that work with consciousness will resonate really fast with those, which is time. So give time to the specific area, emotional intimacy, or physical, or spiritual. And this is actually the key of how to work with it in a proactive way, is to say, I now want to have more emotional intimacy in my life. So how do I do that? Well, I start by looking at time. How can I give more time to emotional intimacy? Presence is the next key. Emotional availability is the third key. Be emotionally available to the person you want to have emotional intimacy with. Curiosity is the fourth key. Be curious. Explore the other person within the emotional intimacy. And the 5th key is creativity. So use your creativity. How can you actually create more emotional intimacy with this person? Do we do a fun exercise one day and say, I heard this wacko crazy woman having eye gazing on her first dates, the other day on Facebook. Would you like to try that out with me? That would be, a way of being creative. Yeah. So those are the 5 keys that I teach, that you can put into practice within every different type of intimacy, the type of intimacy that you want to create more of in your life.
I like it because it's simple and it's elegant, and it is, for those of us who are very kind of goal directed, you can easily say, okay, am I doing this or not? Am I giving the time to myself, my lover, my spirit, my family or community? You can really kind of check it off as a yes or no, because I think otherwise, like that client that says, I long for more intimacy. Well, how do you make that tangible? What does that mean to her? So breaking it down into these domains and then looking at what we're actually doing makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Great. And especially also because when we look at it that way and say, so I will ask a client, of course, I'll say, so how can you use time as a key to create more emotional intimacy in your life? And then they'll start getting into, oh, well, actually, I realize, I could take an hour off every other day to be with my kid, or to speak to my partner, the exotic concept of actually having a conversation with your partner for 1 hour every other day or every 3 days. I could do that. And then we can talk about, so why is this not happening? What's getting in the way of time? So it's the whole idea is that when we talk about intimacy, we have a tendency it becomes very abstract.
Yeah.
And it's often taught very abstract. And what I propose, which is just so that it's been, I have really tested this out on a lot of, it's a method that I have tested on a lot of people and groups also. The gift of that is that it becomes, you can break it down into little concrete pieces that you can actually transform little by little. And and it's a fascinating way. Well, I think, of course, it's a fascinating way to work with intimacy.
Well, I like it as well because I think we are finding more and more people who are waking up. They're having their own conscious awakening and epiphanies, and they're realizing if I'm going to be in a couple situation, then I really want to make sure that I'm bringing the best of me. And we don't get taught these skills of intimacy. We're not taught these sorts of things. And with the changing landscape with technology and so on, it makes it even more challenging. So I'm grateful that you've outlined it so beautifully. So I want to open it up for questions before we finish. If anyone has a question for Lucy or me, you can pop it into the chat. So Lucy is mostly active on Instagram. You can look her up at intimacy_intelligence, or you can just type in intimacy intelligence on Instagram, and Lucy will be the first one that pops up. And she shares videos and tips, and she goes all the way into a lot of very deep erotic stuff as well. But today we're focusing on the digital dating. So if anybody has questions, please feel free. So I think the other question that I would pose to you, or at least a discussion point, is around the idea of when, I'm not asking for rules because I don't like these dating rules like you know, 5 dates before you do this, and I don't like that. But what would you say to a single person who, it doesn't have to be a woman, but a lot of the women that I talk to, they tell me that they are very fast to, once they find someone that they kind of vibe with, they're very fast to kind of let the other ones go. And I know there are people that believe, like, hold on, sister, you should just keep the dating pool open for a while until you really, really see. Do you have any guidelines with intimacy intelligence as to when would we know or feel a good sign that we can start to, focus on that one?
Again, I really like to translate digital life into real life. I love doing that exercise, and I always invite others to do the same and say, okay, so what would you do in real life? When is it that so you've been dating a couple, maybe, going out with one, going to the cinema, or going to coffee with them, going for a walk with the third. When does that moment, when does it happen inside of you that you say, well, I want to give this one a chance. This is what I want to go with now. So the same applies for digital. This is my clear sort of message. I think actually is the most important message, is to say, well, whatever applies in real life is, the more we can take of our consciousness from real life with us into the digital life, the better. The thing is that actually digital life, because it has a different logic, because the commitment is lower, because we know that we can have this ghosting, that suddenly people disappear, or that we have this, our own commitment level goes down and down, among others, because we do not have as much visual contact. I do, when I date, I always do voice audio messages, almost like the second or third thing. And if I don't get that audio message back, it does give me a cue of something. And to me, the ones that give me, like, listening, hearing a person's voice,
Yeah.
it's just like, it takes it from black and white to color. It's like, wow, okay, now I can really sense you. So that's, again, I would say that we can be pro-creators of how do we want, what intimacy level do we want to create with the person? And that would be the question I would ask myself. It's not so much, okay, when should I, only focus on one? Well, yes, that question should be answered with, well, open up some more profound intimacy with the ones that interest you and take it from there and see then
Hmm.
how do they respond, because we don't know who's in the other end. I have to get some power for my computer.
Okay.
So let me have just 2 seconds.
I love it. All right. So,
The conditions of digital life.
all right, absolutely. So I'm going to see if I can add. No, my little text is still looking strange. But I have a question from Jennifer again saying, how do you handle when you feel like you're having a connection with another person and really enjoy speaking to them, but they see you as just a friend?
Ooh. So I have to get my power
Yeah, go
situation.
ahead. I would say that for me, the same thing applies. I would say that the same uh, rule of honesty that if someone, we were kind of vibing and I kind of felt like it's not really going in that lovey-dovey connection, I would just be honest and say, it's been really great getting to know you, but I don't feel like this is going in that direction. What would you do?
I would definitely go down the same path. There's, of course, again, this is how life is, right? That we don't, we just don't always match on these different energetic levels. So, and that applies to a lot of things. Also, that I also work with sexuality, and we can have a very strong romantic relationship, strong romantic energy, but not be compatible on an erotic level.
Yeah.
So that also happens, and of course the other way around, be compatible erotically and not romantically. And so we can also be compatible as friends, but have mismatches on, that one has the romantic interest and the other doesn't. So that is, again, it's a condition of life, the dilemmas of life, the complexities that we have got to deal with and let go. And this was actually my first initial thought is when we're not on the same page, then our what we can do is let go. That's what we can do. If someone we want something romantic with, and they just want to be friends, what the potential of transformation there is to let go of that want and say, okay, I give it love, I give it compassion, and I
And
let it.
release.
Yes.
Got it. This has been a fun conversation. I know it's just the tip of the iceberg, and I'd really love to have you back so that we can dig more into these 5 different areas of developing intimacy intelligence. But for those of you that are curious, if you'd like to check Lucy out on Instagram, just look up intimacy_intelligence. And if you're interested in taking a course with her, I know, Lucy, you're offering a 70% discount because people during COVID, they need a little break on brushing up on their intimacy skills. So just send her a DM with 70% in it, and she will give you information on how to get that. Well, this has been fun. Thank you so much, Lucy. I think this kind of conversation will give people things to think of. And I would say if you have one tip to leave people with, I'm going to steal one of yours. So you're going to have to think of another one. I would say for those of you who are single, if you are doing the online dating thing, I'm going to steal one of the 5 points that Lucy focuses on, and that is time. I think that it's very easy for us to just sort of fire off a text and just sort of give a very boring, canned response. But what if you looked at that person's profile and really tried to of them? Really spending a little bit of time to feel into the energy and then send a response. Not the same copy and paste that you've posted on every other one person's response, but like genuinely tuning in to see what do I really want to know about this person, or what can I ask about something that they've written in their profile. So that is my one tip for those of you who are single and you are in this digital dating realm. Lucy, how about you?
Well, great tip, by the way. I'm going to take that one. I like. Um, I The one tip I would give is actually a challenge to be playful with creativity,
Mm,
and something like, suggest, oh, how would you say that we only give each other voice, that we only communicate on audio, or like you could say that, or you can say, oh yeah, would you like to hop on an eye gazing with me and try that out, or yeah, be send each other videos or whatever. But that I would like to challenge everyone listening and seeing this to be creative with the people that they connect to and feel connected to.
I like that. I like that one because it's like you get what you give.
Yeah.
So I think if you come at it with a little more creativity, you are almost inviting the people you're interacting with to be a little more creative and have a little more fun with it as well. Excellent. Well, thank you all for tuning in for this inaugural edition of Conscious Love. Thank you to my beautiful guest, Lucy Vittrup. Again, check her out, Intimacy Intelligence on Instagram. And, we will keep bringing the shows and the topics. If there are questions that you have, feel free to send me a message. And because I know there are many of you in my viewing audience who are married, I know that some of you have been watching, and it was wonderful to see that our beautiful Margareta Tosi, I don't know if you've met her yet, Lucy, but Margareta met her beautiful husband, Daniele, through digital dating. So, for any of you who have actually manifested love, I'm working on a book project where I'm looking for other authors, people who have a story or a ritual of how you've manifested love or called in the one. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'll give you some details about that book project. But until then, keep keep the playful energy going, and I say, keep hope alive. Um, a few years ago, I kind of gave up on the whole idea of finding the one. And then with all of the different modalities that have come on board with digital dating, and now with RLove, really dialing in an algorithm that's based on a soul connection, I'm a little more optimistic now. I'll be honest. I really do think that there's someone for everyone. And if we don't lose hope, you'll manifest that love. So thank you again, Lucy. It was a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you very much. Big pleasure and honor.
See you all next time.
Bye.